Well, hello and welcome again to our reading of Thucydides Book 1, the Pentakontaetia, and we're up to chapter 105. And this really is an important chapter in the story of the Peloponnesian War. It really, in some sense, marks the beginning of serious hostilities. Athenians ois de nausi apobasi es halias pros Corinthius kai epidaurius make ageneto kai enikon Corinthioi. So we saw in the earlier chapter that the Athenians and the Corinthians were now at loggerheads, and here we get a dative expression here for the Athenians disembarking by ship into Halii. A war took place, or a battle perhaps took place, against the Corinthians and those from Epidaurus, and the Corinthians prevailed. Kai husteron, and afterwards Athenioi, the Athenians, enaumakesan epi kekkurphalea Peloponnesion nausi kai enikon Athenaioi. And afterwards the Athenians fought a sea battle at Kekrophalia, which is a small island in the Saronic Gulf just northeast of Epidaurus, against the ships of the Peloponnesians, and the Athenians prevailed. Polymou de katastantos pros Aiginetas Athenaios metatauta namakia gignatai ep Aigine megale Athenaion kai Aigineton kai hoi sumakoi hekaterois paresan. And I'll just hold it at the comma there. Genitive absolute, and a war broke out for the Athenians against the Aiginetans, those from Aegina, that little island. After these things, a great sea battle took place at Aegina between the Athenians and the Aiginetans. And the sumakoi, the alloys, hekaterois, for both sides were present, and the Athenians prevailed, and having taken 70 ships of theirs, that is, of the enemy, having taken 70 of their ships, apebesan, they disembarked from apobino, it's that technical term of getting off the ship. They disembarked onto land. Kai epoliorkun, they began a siege. Genitive absolute, we've seen this constructions before, with Leocrates, the son of Stroebus, as the general. This was presumably the same guy who was a general at Plataea in 479. Epeta Peloponnesioi emunen boulomenoi Aiginetais es menten Aiginan Triacosius hoplitas proteron Corinthion kai Epidaurion Epicurus di Abibasan. And we'll stop there at the comma. And then the Peloponnesians, wishing Amunane to defend the Aiginetans. Now our main verb is down here, diabibasin. They disembarked on Aegina. Triacosius hoplitas, they had Proteron previously disembarked 300 hoplites on Aegina. Hoplites as Epicurus, well, as additional assistants. So these are auxiliaries from the Corinthians and the Epidaurians. Tade akrates geraneas katelabon, kai esten megarida kat ebesan Korinthioi metaton sumakon. And I'll stop there at the comma. They took the heights of Geranea and Kat Ebesan, so the Corinthians, along with their allies, went down into the Megarid, that is the area near around Megara. So the plan is that while the Athenian fleet is off attacking Aegina, the Corinthians decide to go down and invade the Megarid along with their allies. Nomisdontes adunatus essestai Athenaios boethen tois megarusin ente Aegine apuses stratias poles kai en Aegypto. So thinking that the Athenians, future infinitive here, to be about to be unable. So thinking that the Athenians will not be able, boethen, to render assistance to the Megarians, and genitive absolute here, much of their stratia, much of their army, being absent in Aegina and in Egypt, as we saw in the previous chapter. Einde kai boethosin ap Aigines anastesestai autus. And even if, so the kai here, even and for and even if they did render aid, they would, future infinitive here, they would anastasai, they would have to uproot them from Aegina. They'd have to bring them back from Aegina. So, but the Athenians, top men pros Aegina stratioma uk ekinesan. So, but the Athenians did not disturb their army, which was at Aegina, but now they afhikununtai is the main verb here, so the subject is hoi presbutatoi kai hoi neotatoi. But the eldest and the youngest, that is those under 20 and those over 40, of those from the city, hupo loipon, so but from those who were left behind at the city, the older men and the younger ones, affix nuntai, historic present, they arrive esta Megara, in Megara, and genitive absolute with Muronides strateguntos as the general. Now this is the well-known, Muronides of course is the well-known general at Plataea in 479. Kai makes genomenes isoropu pros Corinthius diacrithesan ep elelon. And a battle having taken place, isoropu, literally equally balanced. There is that verb repo, to balance, and there's a noun from that, a balance, so this is equally balanced. So when the battle was equally balanced, i.e. it was a stalemate, against the Corinthians, diacrithesan, they separated ap elelon from one another, kai enomisan autoi, and they themselves considered, hekateroi, both sides themselves considered or thought themselves in the task not to be lesser. So this is elasson. It's neuter here. It's probably that idiom of echo plus an adverb here. So take echo in the sense of to be. So so it's really neither side regarded themselves as having fared no worse in to ergo in the action. Hoi men Athenaioi and the Athenians, on the one hand, ekratesan ga homos malon, parenthetical here, they prevailed. So homos, nevertheless, the Athenians prevailed somewhat more. And when the Corinthians had gone, they, the Athenians, set up a tropaion, a trophy, a victory trophy, which was generally consisted of a tree trunk on which you hung the weaponry of the enemy. Now, balancing the hoi men, we get a hoi der, but the Corinthians, kakizomenoi, accused of cowardice by the old men in the city. Well, you can imagine the Athenians consisted of old men and young men, and the Corinthian army was unable to match them. So you can imagine the old men back home in Corinth saying, "Oh, I could have done better than that." So they accused them of cowardice, and having made preparations, heimerais husteron dodecum malista. Malista with numbers often means approximately. So approximately 12 days later, Elthontes coming, anthistasin tropaion kai autoi hos nikesantes. So they set up a rival, it's the sense of the ante here, they set up a rival trophy, as though they themselves had won. And the Athenians, ekbai thesantes, well, it generally means to render aid or something, but here I think we just translate went out. So having set out from Megarid, the main verb here is diaphterusi, they killed tous histantos ton tropaion, the ones who were setting up the trophy, and sol labontes, attacking the others, ekratesen, they got control. Perhaps they regained control. That's the end of chapter 105. 106 now is a major defeat for the Corinthians. Hoide Nikomenoi hup ekorun. And they being defeated, they withdrew. Kai ti auton meros uk oligon prospias then kai di hameton tes hodu except epesen es tu kuriu idiotu. Hoi etoken orugma mega perieragon kai uk an exhodos. So they withdrew, and ti meros, this is a neuter noun, a certain portion of them, uk oligon, not a small one, so a certain large portion of them, section of them, and we get two neuter participles here agreeing with meros. Pros bias then, literally being hard pressed, kai diamaton, this again is a neuter participle, this one's passive, this is active, and having missed, it takes a genitive, having missed the road, so perhaps having got lost, es epesen, they fell into. Now be careful with this little two, you'll see there's no accent on it and it's enclitic. This is the two for the indefinite tini. So they arrived at or found themselves in the place of some private citizen. To for tinos here, the indefinite. So into the land of some private citizen. Hoi, probably the antecedent is chorion. In for which there chanced, understand, to be a orugma mega, a great ditch. Peri-eragon, this is from that ergo root of covering something over so to seal up. So a great ditch, and this is a neuter participle agreeing with orugma. So for whom there chanced being a great ditch, well, perhaps here surrounding it, so closing it in is that sense of ergo. So closing around it, kai uk ein exodos, and there was no way out. Hoida Athenaioi gnontes kata prosopon te ergon, there's that verb again, tois hoplitais kai peris desantes kukloi, tus psilus kat eliusan pantes tus ezelthontas. Kai pathos mega to Korinthios Aigineto. So the Athenians, gnontes, having realized this, eragon, this is this idea of sealing or surrounding it. So they sealed it off, kata prosepon, literally at the face, so at the front, at the entrance, and peristesantes, having stationed around, kukloi in a circle, the light armed troops, kat eliusan, they stoned all those had gone into it. So they killed by stoning all, they threw large stones and killed all those that had gone into it. And this, Aigineto, was a pathos mega, a great disaster for the Corinthians. Todeplethos, but the multitude, this was only one large contingent, but the rest of them, anakoresan, they withdrew, the multitude tes stratias, the multitude of the army for them, so the multitude of the army withdrew ep oiku, back home again. And this is often seen as the main mark of the beginning of the First Peloponnesian War, this being a great disaster for the Corinthians at the hands of the Athenians.